sixth stage of grief, as defined by the author and grief expert David Kessler, is meaning making. Meaning making, in this sense, refers to create meaning or purpose from loss. How, if at all, do you think a search for meaning might influence the women of the collective and their choice to participate? Now that Harris Blanchard is dead, how do you believe that might affect Camille's commitment to the group?
So I'll say this. So on one end, I think the idea of this being like a meaning-making activity for the women of the collective aligns with what I was talking about earlier in terms of kind of them being like quote unquote generators, the type of people who want to will things to happen, the type of people who have to do. I'll say another theory about the women of the collective is that they're very vulnerable in their moment of grief. And in the same way that like people talk about the vulnerability and the susceptibility of people who end up joining like cults and things like that, that I was kind of going along those lines. Like these women are in deep grief and that makes them more susceptible to certain ideas. And even their intention to become, or the first action they took to become a part of this may have been an impulsive decision out of that level of rage. And then I can't recall, actually I'll ask you both. Did 001 specify if you can kind of like leave the collective? Like if you decide, hey, I'm no longer interested in this, did she specify what happens then?
Not that I recall.
Oh yeah, not that I remember.
Okay, because I'm wondering like how many people are in it because they have no choice at this point. Yeah, because I'm wondering how many people would still be so interested in doing this if they're not avenging the death of their deceased child. And so anyways, I say that to say that I'm unsure how much I believe meaning making goes into the decisions for these women to become a part of the collective. For Camille, it seems clear to me that she's already feeling like at odds with the whole situation, and she's already dealing with a lot of anguish after Harris Blanchard's death. But I don't know how I feel about Harris Blanchard's death itself resulting in her, like, because she's not resulting in her being less committed. I don't know if I have a strong opinion about that, honestly.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree. Like, just hearing the term, like, this is my first time hearing the concept of meaning making, but to me it kind of sounds like that kind of like cliche, like, oh, this happened because whatever, or they're in a better place or something like that. And it definitely seems like these women are like leaning into the anger at the murder rather than like, oh, why did this happen to me or so and so. Like, I definitely think it's not a major factor in them wanting to participate. I think they participate because they are filled with rage, I guess, for lack of better terms. But I think as like something I did note is that now that Harris is dead, it seems like Camilla's going to be left with like the bare bones of like how she feels and like the state that the death of Emily has left her in. And I think she will kind of be forced to make sense of what happened and why to Emily, because there's still so many holes for her, as we were kind of exploring in the last couple of chapters that we read. Like 001 was saying, oh, you question, was she promiscuous or did she have a side to her that you didn't know about? And I think Camilla's gonna have to like sit with herself, and I think she's like, she barely wanted to acknowledge that you're part of like a killing ring. So now she's definitely gonna like pull away from the collective. And so I think that's kind of what the ending is gonna be about. Like, does the whole operation blow up? Like, what's gonna happen kind of thing. I think she's gonna become less committed as she gets further along in her grief process.
I did want to add something just for context, because you were talking about kind of meaning making, and just to kind of make sure David Kessler's, I guess, theory is like understood or communicated in the best possible way. I did watch an interview with him talking about meaning making, and when they are referring to that, they're not necessarily saying meaning finding. So like finding meaning in the situation. In fact, he like specifically said like there, in his belief, there's no meaning in the fact that this tragedy happened to you. Meaning making is making something from the loss. So I just want to be clear that that like wasn't his intention when he's talking about that. But
Okay. Yeah, that was definitely what I thought. But my answer, I still agree with you. Like, I don't think that they're doing this to like see, like to say like, oh, my child's death will not have been for nothing because now I'm killing their killer. Like, I think it's just like their rage, I think.
Well, I also kind of want to add that they say that people tend to grieve out of that order of the stages sometimes. And so I was trying to imagine someone who's grieving the loss of their child, where one of the first steps they go through is meaning making and what that would look like. And if they would, ultimately find themselves in this group. And I feel like a little bit I can. I especially think I can see that from people who don't like feeling out of control. And when you lose a child, there's you have no control over that. Death, there's no one can control that. And so someone who so badly wants pieces to fit perfectly would probably see this situation as I am balancing the scales. I am, providing justice in this world. I'm taking it into my hands. Ultimately, I'm helping further something that should be in place already. And so I can see that almost from some of the ladies possibly taking that approach to it. But I mean, also, yeah, I see it the other way as well. Like, it's just rage that's fueling them to do these things. And then, as far as like the next part of this question, Harris Blanchard being dead now, I mean, what is left after that? He's gone. That fire's gone. So, what's propelling you to continue these acts? And I love that you brought that up, Tia, that question of whether anyone has ever left the group. How could they possibly? How could they? I could not see 0001 ever allowing anyone to, knowing what they know, have done what they've done, just out roaming. There's no way. And so, one, I fear for Camille's life at this point, because I mean, this happened so quickly. She joined the group, and then Harris Blanchard's dead. Like soon after that, joining this group, she wasn't there for much long, but she definitely played a major part in some, multiple things that happened. And so, what is to come of that? I, I just, I definitely see it affecting her commitment to the group wholeheartedly, but I'm not completely sure. Like, well, she seems so like rebellious anyways, so I could definitely see her like flipping on them and like trying to turn them in. And I'm trying to figure out if there's any sense of like fear in her that would maybe keep her from doing that though. And maybe she could, like, she just goes out of her way to like she went and found the librarian because she remembered seeing her face and stuff. So it's like I feel like there might be a part of her that's still interested and invested, but at the same time, she doesn't have that. She doesn't display at least that sense of fear and like what the group could do to her if she turns on. So I don't know. I'm kind of like in that phase.
I think you said a key word, Asia. You said, so when I was thinking about meaning making, I was thinking about the idea of like you're helping these other women find vengeance for their dead children or murdered children. but you said the word control, and I added on the word power as well. And it seems like, at least from Camilla's perspective, I feel like these were major, her desire for control and her desire for power, which kind of goes into our next question, were two large factors in her decision to do this. It seemed like she wanted to affect, or at least even when she stated that she believed this was when she said she believed that this was a role-playing exercise, it seemed like it gave her a sense of, it took away some of her powerlessness. And even like how intricate and detailed everything is, even how like honestly filled her schedule seems to be right now with assignments for the collective, it may offer some control and kind of what otherwise for some of these women may be the abyss of the grief that they're experiencing.
All right. Question 4. On page 81 of the novel, Camille recalls a conversation she had with 0001, where 0001 stated, "There's a reason why the poor and disenfranchised find direction in the military. There's safety in numbers, yes, but more important, there is power." Please share your thoughts and reflections on this quote. Additionally, what ways, if any, do you see this desire for safety and power play out amongst disenfranchised groups?
So I'll say I want to be clear to the audience that our intention here is kind of to share our experiences. We're not like an educational platform in the traditional sense. We really encourage you all to, if you're really interested in kind of statistics about certain social issues that we talk about, including collective trauma and grief, we do encourage you to go out and research. And whenever we can, we'll provide resources for you all to do so whenever it feels appropriate. But I did want to offer some of the information I found. So I was curious to know, like, is that actually a thing? Like, is it true that people from disenfranchised groups are more likely to be like recruits for military services? And again, and maybe Asia, this is something that we can provide in the show notes. And I did a very brief search. This is in no way exhaustive. And I would encourage you guys to go look at these articles yourself. But I was looking and I found information from the West Coast Poverty Center, and they kind of reported on a study that was found, or did like a summary of a study that was found by I think it's the Margaret Casey Fund. It was funded by the Margaret Casey Fund, and an associate with I think Washington State University. His name is Professor Alair McLean. He did a study and he saw that there was more like a wealth, what he used to call a wealth exception. So people in the top percentage of wealth are less likely as recruits, but there's not this poverty draft that, and I don't know if maybe that was an assumption that people had or a narrative that was running, but they don't find that people in the lower socioeconomic status space are more likely to be drafted than people who are like maybe middle class, for example. But there are people at the top are less likely to draft. And that there was also no significant difference in enlistment between Blacks, whites, and Hispanics. Now, I assume that means that by no significant difference, I assume that means that the ratio is appropriate for the percentage of people who represent that particular group. So approximately like 13% of America identify as Black Americans. And so I would imagine that when they say no significant difference, they mean that about 13% of the armed forces are Black as well. But they didn't specify on that. And then I saw on the Council of Foreign Relations that it says that people who sign up for military service are primarily middle class. And we're not seeing as much of the upper class or the lower class. And that there were significant racial and ethnic differences between branches, but that there was less diversity in the highest of ranks. So not so much like officers, but like, I think they mentioned like generals, chiefs, stuff like that, which we probably all could have guessed, honestly. And I also did find that there was no data reported on LGBTQ plus service members, but I did want to kind of still hear you all. So that's the statistics that I found. But I did still want to hear you all's experience with that, because that could be vastly different from what we're seeing here.
Well, in my experience, like I grew up, I think what would be considered middle class. And so when we would see like the military recruitment booth, like at lunch or something like that, it seemed like the people that were interested were the ones that would be like considered like the stoners, or the ones that after we graduated, they just kind of stayed at home, didn't work. So I definitely don't think it's like they're targeting like people that were like had like housing insecurity or like food insecurity. It seems like people that didn't really have um a direction from what the outside can see, or maybe they never had an outlet or any hobbies. It seems like they were the most susceptible to just, oh, let me just go away and travel and work out and, just take orders type of thing and be a part of a unit of many. But let me just kind of like fade into that and like kind of almost like lose myself in just taking orders almost. That's kind of like what I observed.
Yeah, I agree with you, Elaine. I think for me, I grew up the lower class. Yeah, but I wouldn't say we lived in poverty. I wouldn't say that, but we struggled. Um, but I'd say that our options were one of two things. You're either going to college or you're going to the military, but you can't stay in this house and just not do anything. Those are the options. And for a lot of people, going to college just wasn't an option because they couldn't afford it. So a lot of people I went to high school with went straight into the military. But also another thing that contributed to that was I lived in a military town, so it was very easy for you to just join the military. It was just what it was. Um, so yeah, I kind of disagree because I don't. I feel like we're talking about anyone who's in a dire state, I feel like yeah, like you said, when you're experiencing housing insecurity and all that, I don't know if your thought is immediately like, I need to join the military. Um,
Yeah, because the income is kind of delayed. I mean, I've never been in the military, but it's not like you get that money to immediately change your situation.
yeah, I feel like if you're really trying to like make ends meet, you're doing it in I don't want to say it's not a get rich fast type thing, but it's just like something that's convenient and quick. And military, there's a lot to it. And also, I just don't see if you're also just depending on who you are, where you fall in your family. So, like, for instance, the head of the household, they're not necessarily going to be the ones to try to go off into the military because they'd have to be at home because they probably raised in a family and there's other people that are dependent on them. So being away isn't always ideal. Now, if you're like the oldest child in the family, maybe there's pressure to join the military because your family's in, a dire state. So I think it also just depends on who we're speaking in regards to that. But I don't know. I don't necessarily completely agree with that statement. I think it's easily assumed that that's the case because if you're poor, you need money, And so it's like, oh, the military, easy, right? But like, I think there's so much more thought put into it, especially now with revelations about some of the things that go into being part of the military and how that's really difficult. And I think it's more complex than that, than just saying that poor and disenfranchised individuals find themselves in the military or they find direction in the military. I don't think that's just simplifying it way too much for me. But I could see on the other part where when you find, for those who do find direction in the military, how there is that sense of like, I feel safe because there's more of us. We can band together almost because you're going through an experience that's tough. And it's something that not a lot of people get to experience. I could see how they feel safe in those numbers, and then there's some sort of like there's a power that might come to play into that. I could see it. I don't agree necessarily with the beginning part that maybe it's the poor and disenfranchised that are the ones kind of pushing forward in that direction. But I don't know.
Right. And just to kind of like touch on the last part where it says like, in what ways do you see the desire for power or safety kind of like manifest amongst like those groups? I feel like I was just talking about this with my family, like how I think like in certain neighborhoods, like to like join a gang can be like a mechanism for like having some like form of like safety or protection, or just to have someone as like a family type of unit. And so kind of similarly with like the collective, it's like they kind of got drawn in by like, oh, we all lost children because someone murdered them. But then they start helping with the crimes. Like it kind of starts off small, like, oh, come get this phone or mail this knife here. And then before you know it, you're like pushing a car off a pier. So I think I think it would be kind of, it is kind of like harkens back to the last question, but I think it would be appealing to stay involved in the collective even after you kind of like get your child's murderer back, because at this point you have blood on your hands, and if you kind of like betray them, I feel like you can feel like you're more in danger of being outed. I feel like at this point in their crimes, like it almost would be safer to stay associated rather than to burn that bridge. Like, so yeah, that's kind of how I feel about how it can play out. Like you can kind of get trapped in a way, kind of stuck in that whatever group you've gotten involved with when you're disenfranchised.
Yeah, Elena, in terms of where I see the desire for safety and power play out amongst disenfranchised groups, I also noted organized crime. I also put kind of like, so I've noticed kind of a conversation about, or maybe it's just been kind of in my inner circle, there's been conversations about like what's the best way to produce social change. And so one school of thought is that like expressing things like protests and sit-ins and things that kind of like shut shit down, you know what I mean? Like those type of situations where it's disruptive, like disruptive forms of social change are the way to go about it, and the way for the powers that be to notice the issue and the people who are being affected by the issue. And then on another school of thought, it's kind of like use the democratic system, whether that be lobbying, speaking to your representatives, things like that. And so I think I wonder, and again, this is kind of me theorizing, like disenfranchised groups, obviously, if you're disenfranchised groups seem more likely to kind of be doing the protest versus, I'm sure there are people who maybe are speaking on behalf of groups who are not disenfranchised and are still, making requests to their representatives, but that sense of coming together, banding together for a common cause, I think that's displayed in that situation. Like the disenfranchised group gains power, gains strength from all being together, in one. And then also even like familial structure. So you could argue that maybe it's like culture as well, but if you look at the different ethnic groups of America, like family orientation tends to be, from my understanding, at least in my studies, like psychology and like social work and things like that, familial structures tend to be closer, like tighter in like Black American families and Hispanic families and Asian families versus white American families. And maybe a part of that is the cultures of origin. But maybe also part of that is the necessity of it in our history here in America, like European Americans being in the majority, may not feel the same connectedness, may not feel the same connectedness with their family unit in the way that maybe being a part of an ethnic group necessitates. So that's just like a theory to throw out there.
Well, we're going to take a short moment to just quickly remind our viewers to go ahead and like and subscribe to our channel. We also love to hear from you in our comments below. Please join in on the conversation. If you have any responses to any of the questions, we definitely would love to hear from you. But yeah, please subscribe and turn on your notification bells to know when we do post more videos like this.
Okay, so our final question of the day is, on page 109 of the novel, Camille reflects on the partial truth she told Luke about meeting new people who know her for who she is rather than what she's lost. She soliloquizes, saying, "I am who I am because of what I've lost. I can't change that. And so I have found new friends who are as burned and shaped and redefined by loss as I am." How do each of you, if at all, feel you've been defined by loss? And how has that informed the relationships you choose? So I can start. So the things I wrote down were ego and mental health. In the last couple of years, they have been really trying years, and there's been like more loss than I've experienced probably in my entire life. And to be clear, this is not talking about death. In the span of like only a few months, I feel like I lost like a job. I had to drop out of a master's program I was in. So I was like losing like income. A lot of the ideas I had for my life, I was losing. I lost at the end of 2021, I think. I lost a relationship. There was a lengthy relationship and very a major part of my entire adult experience. And so there's been a lot of loss for me as a result of mental health. So mental health is why I had to drop out of school and why I chose to leave my job and everything. And it got really, really challenging, to be clear. Like, I spent some time in a psychiatric hospital, and there were just a lot of things that I had to come to terms with as far as my capacity. I also had a lot of ego death. I had a lot of letting go of the ideals that I had for myself, letting go of who I thought myself to be, recognizing that people may no longer be able to perceive me as the ambitious and hardworking and, you know, the girl who's on her way to the top, and all of these things that I had the privilege of having people to consider about me. Like, I had to really let that go. And that was so necessary for me. I think like how that's played a role in my relationships. I think ego has always played a major role in my relationships, and I think I'm in a place now where I'm able to be more intentional about how it plays a role. But I will say that I got into a lot of relationships, or started a lot of relationships in these past couple of years. They were very ego focused. I felt so like outside of what I felt my purpose was. Kind of felt like, who are you if you're not all of these things? And the relationships that I was forming, where I felt like I was constantly giving back to people, or trying to be there for people in a certain way, or people had this certain view of me, allowed me to gain some of what I had lost in that, and be a semblance of what I thought I was before. As far as how I've been defined by loss, I would say because of the what felt like such a brutal shedding of ego, and like shedding of like all the things that were such a large part of my identity, and things I really held on to as indicators of my value. I think I had to find value in all that I am, and the parts of me that really frustrate me. And I had to focus less on how to build myself toward this ideal, and focus more on like, how do I actually bring peace and joy in my life? What are the things that I require in order to bring that in my life? Not the ideality and not who you want yourself to be. And how do I fall in love with and find radical acceptance for who I am versus who I desire to be. And I think that's been a very important part of my journey.
Yeah, I definitely kind of like relate to a lot of what you said, like, but like in a different way. Like, I think kind of like growing up in like a predominantly white area, you like before you hit like a certain age, and I kind of like, um, for me, it was like ninth grade is when the people that I went to elementary school and middle school with, like they were just my friends and they were white because I was in a white area. And then as we got older, when children start to care about like social hierarchies and, oh, this is the cool person and I want to be here and like you're holding me back. It was like people that I had known my whole life had decided that like I was not going to fit into the cool whatever situation. So I kind of have like a weird like relationship with like friendships. Like I think that like, oh, I'm not cool enough for these people, or like one day they're just gonna stop talking to me. Or like one day I'm gonna go up to them and they're gonna act like they don't know me, because that's all stuff that has happened. So um in terms of friendships, I've kind of like avoided them altogether. But like what I did notice like when I was younger is like if I was interested in like a guy or something, I would always try to pick someone who I thought would like be obsessed with me or something. Like pick someone who I thought like, oh yeah, they're never gonna want to stop talking to me. And yeah, I think kind of like that's how like my relationship with loss has informed the way that in the past I interacted with like friends and partners, etc. Like I don't do that anymore, but like definitely then it was just a very weird space to be in.
Yeah, to just follow up with all you were saying, like my loss had to do with a lot of my relationships. A running theme in my life was is control, and um, I so badly want to be in control of everything. Because for most of my life, I just witnessed a lot of people I care about at the mercy of those who were in control and like abuse that control. And so I, always sought to not be that person. I never wanted to be victimized in that way. So I, because of this control issue, I have the tendency to hold on to relationships even way past the point where they, way past the point where they definitely should have been gone, just because control and wanting things to hold on to tightly to everything. Because I feel like if I let that go, then just that would break down all these structures I built within myself. And a lot of the times, a lot of these people that I'm holding on to, they help me find a part of myself. So in a way, it almost feels as if like I'm losing myself when they're gone. Um, and then also it just feels like I won't be validated in the way they provided me. So um, yeah, in recent, like these past couple years, I've just noticed slowly but surely there's just been me, letting people out of my life that no longer served a purpose, or it was toxic in any way. And that was very difficult. But through that, I obviously learned a lot about myself. But most importantly, I've just been able to gain this sense of um, allowing and embracing what's new. Um, Change is very difficult for me, but I've been able to pioneer it in a way in my life and just kind of forge it and just force it upon myself instead of always like running and hiding from it. Um, which has allowed me a completely different outlook on life and allowed me to cope with a lot of things that we experience in life. You know, the big traumatic things that, you know, we can't control, but like when you're able to see that there's another day and, you know, you're able to move forward and that, you know, this change is happening, but it could be for the better, and your life will be looking differently, but it doesn't always have to look, it doesn't have to be this grim outlook. You don't have to think that things are changing for the worse, you know? So, and ultimately, how, to answer the last part of the question, how has it informed the relationships I choose? I feel that I've tried to allow more of like the natural relationships to kind of form instead of being so picky and decisive. Granted, if there's like someone where I just can't, there's obvious like tension there, or there's obvious like disconnect in their relationship, I don't, you know, press for it, but I'm more allowing in the things that come my way than I was before. And I'm also in a place where I try to remind myself that if it doesn't work out, it's fine. I don't have to see it as a failure on my part or even on their part. You know, it is what it is, and that's okay. And there's something I still gain from that. So, all right, Tribe. Well, that was all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all found value in the conversations we were having. Again, if you would love to join in on the conversation, if you have thoughts, go ahead and comment them in the comment section below. Also, like the video if you enjoyed what you've seen here. Also, stick around for more information about the charities that our community will be supporting this season. We hope that you join us for the next episode. There's always room for you here. Brady, welcome.
Hey Tribe, before you go, we wanted to chat with you about how you can help your fellow humans navigate collective grief and trauma. This season, each host has chosen a charity to share with you all. The charities we've selected have missions that address collective grief or trauma in some way. Our hope is that you'll find a charity whose mission aligns with your hopes for humanity.
You can check the description box for links to our fundraising pages. We encourage you all to explore the websites for information about each organization's impact and ensure you're making an informed decision when giving. InfoBlue Media has no affiliation with any of these charities or crowdfunding platforms. Thank you all for your consideration.
Journey well.